What's your carnal theory?
Rachel, if you would, please share with us what you've brought for us today.
All right. It is that there's no one sexual path to take. You create your path by making it.
Yes.
Ta-da.
Yes.
Should I continue?
You certainly may. You can elaborate.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's a lot to this. One is that we, as many of us are aware, there has been these messages, primarily like the idea of heteronormative messages, as far as the when, the how, and the what of sex, and if there's even any conversation at all. But the extent to which sex is, at least kind of the good old fashioned American way, it's very performative. Like, this is how you should do it. It's very mechanical. This is how you do it. It's very outcome based. Like, this is sort of why you do it, to produce something. And it's just so limiting. And there's so much, there's shame and misconception. And one of the things I find so beautiful about human beings and human sexuality and topics around desire and intimacy and eroticism is how there is no normal. There isn't any, this is the way. And when we liberate ourselves to step into connecting to our own body, our own desires, what is sex and intimacy and eroticism to us, and then really chart that path forward, it's very empowering, and it can bring up a lot. I'm not saying it's all fun and good times, but it really can be, I think, a portal to such inner knowing and the kind of synergistic intimacy with others that you also maybe can't achieve alone. But you have to have that sense of going inward and looking, and then really the courage to start to explore with your own kind of body, and yes and no, and be vulnerable with other people. So there's obviously a lot to it, but that's the gist of that theory.
Yes. And I mentioned this as we were getting started. It's so parallel to what we push at My Sex Bio, which is taking command of your sexual biography, your story, your path. You have control over writing it. You create your path by making it, as your theory says. And there's not one correct path, and there's not an end to it. Just like any other path, any other part of your life story, your career, your family, or whatever, it's how you want to shape and form it. And not a single one is correct, because it's
right. And can always be evolving and growing. And one of my favorite quotes is that, we go about life as if it were a problem to be solved, not a mystery to be lived. And the same could be said for really the growth and leaning into to be more intimate with your own self regarding your sexuality. And it can always maybe be shape shifting, and there's some beautiful mystery to that. And that being said, it can also be really scary for people to be in their body, let alone with someone else. So it's a beautiful thing. It can be, I've heard somebody once say, sex can be magic. It can also be tragic. And so there's the shadow side of it. And that's part of why I guess we all do what we do, is that we have these conversations to help, I guess, liberate others as well from the ways in which they might feel really buried or stuck along these lines.
Yes. And in those like socially cast constructs, one of them is that you just have one partner. So in relationship to the theme and part of what we're focusing on today, where your path might take you might be non-monogamy. And so we want to get into what ethical non-monogamy is. And if you could, Rachel, could you maybe talk a little bit about maybe some of the misconceptions around ethical non-monogamy? I'm going to do that more than once. I can feel it in my mouth already.
We just say ENM.
ENM.
People know.
Yes. Yes.
ENM. Yes. I mean, some of the misconceptions are that it's cheating that it is a way to avoid intimacy, that the people engage in it are promiscuous, that it's only about sex. And there's probably many more. And then I think just misconceptions of just, it means, somebody, I don't know, they can't control themselves, or again, that idea of just being sexually promiscuous or things. Even though in fact, it can be about all sorts of things that are also about emotional intimacy and connection, and exploration and self-discovery, and things that help to even enhance the primary relationship. It can be about enhancing communication and, learning and growth that way as well. But those are the main misconceptions that come up for me. Maybe the two of you also have some more to add.
Well, I'll call out, I love that you brought up that it's not just about sex, that this is not explicitly sex. Like, relationships are more than sex. So monogamy isn't saying who you're just going out and having sex with. Like, these are relationships, and you get many things out of that. And sometimes, as you just made a lovely list of, it's emotional growth, it's, intelligence, it's learning different communication styles. It could be a number of things that maybe you bring back to whoever maybe your either primary partner is, or however you are, whatever your relationship status is. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's a great misconception to knock out.
Yeah. And it can be a way to also learn more about boundaries, about expressing your needs and wants, I think dealing with jealousy is probably one of the main things that a lot of people might first think of too. And that it can be a factor, no doubt. And it really entails, for when we say ethical, that it does entail, there's a lot of truth and honesty and communication, and a lot of things that are important in relationships in which there is monogamy, more maybe traditional models as well.
Would you say that that's the main, sorry, Amanda, would you say that that's the main differential factor of just non-monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy, is that communication aspect?
Yeah, I think honesty, certainly, agreement, checking in, being open and honest. That I would say that's, and really working together to figure out how it can work for the parties involved. So the main thing that comes to mind for me is just that element of being open versus hiding. That's where I think conversations like this are so important, because there might be all sorts of people out there that felt the only option was to do it in a secret way, because they didn't even have the tools to know how to bring it up, or it's really scary to even talk about it. And so, but then the body and kind of our inner desire sometimes will just also, if there are unmet needs, they will go find a way to get them met. And so conversations like this, at least then, are giving people the opportunity to know that, hey, this is a conversation that people are having. You could have too. And that for somebody that you respect and care about too, it will only enhance things, or certainly give you information to talk about it.
Oftentimes at a certain point, we sort of land on like, this is who I am sexually. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. These are the kind of people I'm attracted to, or the genders I'm attracted to. This is my sexual identity. Mm-hmm. Right. No, not everybody. Some people are super flexible and fluid and constantly changing, but for the most part, people tend to kind of land on, this is my sexual identity. When we are not attached to being one separate solid thing, that opens up, and therefore endless possibility for who we could be sexually and what that could look like opens up. Also, when there's less suffering associated with being a human, things like ethical non-monogamy become way more possible, because we're not attached to the suffering self that's jealous, or the suffering self that's falling in love with someone else and trying to manage, schedules, right? We can move through all of that with less of a sense of I'm this separate self that's struggling to get it right or to, not feel bad in one way or another, or not make someone else feel bad.
Within the context of what we talked about so far, like expansiveness and absorbing experiences, and how like there's no kind of end to that potential plane, might something like ethical non-monogamy might expand our experiences or our awareness even more then? Like, could it be of benefit?
Yes, absolutely. I am not someone who's like, everyone should be non-monogamous. I think I've made clear that, like, in general, I don't tend to think in black and white terms. And so I don't think of it as like the right way.
Right.
In fact, there are some people who it's absolutely not the right way for one reason or another. But yeah, non-monogamy is a pretty radical spiritual path.
Radical spiritual path. Can you elaborate on what that means to you?
Okay. So for example, I've been non-monogamous my whole life. I wasn't always ethically non-monogamous, but I've always been some version of non-monogamous. And I've also been monogamous, but certainly for periods, but I tend to be non-monogamous. When I really decided to explore it in a super conscious, mindful, ethical way, it meant encountering jealousy in a really real way. And for me, that jealousy was associated with abandonment, and it was associated with neglect, and it was associated with trauma. And when I went into it in a way that was curious and accepting, like, oh, wow, this feeling of jealousy is like a crushing rocks inside my chest, or like my mind is just looping, or I'm just like seeing these horrible images of the worst case scenario, right? When I deconstructed those pieces using meditation and looked at them as like their own strands of experience, they ceased to be this tangled up knot. And they started to just be a flow of activity, a flow of that activity that actually flows into everything else. And so not only did that allow for some healing around the trauma and the neglect and the abandonment, which, believe me, also involves therapy and also involves, all kinds of things. Like, it's not just sit down and meditate. But it allowed for that healing, and it also opened up perception, right? Like, there were things I could see and experience that previously I hadn't been able to, such as compersion, right? The opposite of jealousy, enjoying seeing your partner fall in love or have a like really fun, sexual connection with someone and experience new relationship energy, right? Like, that wasn't an experience I was familiar with. Like, while I didn't want to be monogamous, I wanted you to be monogamous because I didn't want to deal with my jealousy. And the fact that I could experience compersion and like actually be happy for my partner, it's a whole new kind of emotion that I hadn't experienced before. So that's just one.
Hey there, you're listening to Carnal Theory, where we talk with experts from around the world to learn how taking command of our sexual story affects our personal wellness, sexual experiences, and relationships with ourselves and others.